And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Techtonic Lounge, final episode for 2024. We thought we would start and end the year the same way, with Christophe and I having a fun conversation. I wanted to share a few things, and then Christophe and I are going to talk a little bit about what we see coming up for 2025. So, Christophe, welcome back.
It's always good to be on.
Yeah. So, we have had a fun year, lots of adventures. It's snowing where I'm at most days these days. I'm guessing it hasn't happened much of that in Vietnam. So let me just kind of throw out a thought, and then I'll share some of my thoughts here. From the episodes that we've had, did you have any takeaways, any deep thoughts that stood out, anything that kind of caught your attention from the things you've listened to on Techtonic Lounge throughout 2024?
I don't know, they had a lot of really great guests who were on, had lots of different ideas, whether it was a great expanse from technology, whether that was specific to having Andrew on who really dug into AI and just the thoughts all around it. Obviously, this last year with AI being such a big thing, so it was great to hear his opinions and thoughts around it. Then, different people from different spaces and education and everything. So, I don't know. One of the things that really stood out to me is the quote where he was talking about the idea of everyone doesn't have enough time to build it right, but always enough time to build it twice. That's something that really resounded with me. I was like, I'm gonna keep that in the back of my mind. But yeah, we've had a lot of good guests with a lot of great ideas, and so a lot of good takeaways.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking with a lot of folks. It's been fun to find people who are experts in their field. Several that stood out is obviously folks who are in the startup space, talking with Jason and some of his thinking behind why the technology is a solution, and particularly identifying particular problems in business and education that their technology can solve. Really enjoyed talking with Ashley and the idea of product owner, product manager, and kind of how you think holistically about experience with the customer on all the platforms, as well as just maintaining that interest, maintaining that relationship within the infrastructure of a brand. I think it was quite interesting to get her perspective. And of course, because I'm partial to education, it's been several perspectives, both lower levels of education all the way to higher education, being able to get the perspective, because that's the next generation who's going to be, well, jumping way ahead of us on all this technology stuff. We are not spring chickens anymore. But here are my takeaways, and I'll throw a few, and feel free to kind of add on any of your thoughts. What I've noticed, and obviously AI was a topic, and I'd say 85% of our conversations, somehow AI came up. AI, maybe, I'm shocked that the dictionary folks didn't choose AI as word of the year, because I think you couldn't, throw a brick without hitting an AI conversation in tech. But what I realized is, as much as people are, shall we say, even obsessed with AI, and I'm not even talking about the VC funds, the venture capitalists who think as soon as you put AI on a company, it instantly is investable. But overall, people are either terrified of it, some people are, and they think that it's the end of everything, or I think it's the greatest thing ever. But what I've noticed is we are highlighting very specific needs where we as humans, we as professionals in certain areas can deliver value, while slowly allowing AI to simplify our lives and enhance what we do. So the ideas of automation have always been around, right? So we can do a lot of things, and AI can allow you to set up patterns and systems and even make some better decisions. But I think, at least I counted as I went back through all the episodes, at least 7 different guests specifically said AI is great, but not for the final output. So if you're creating content, if you're creating decision trees, presentations, don't assume that it's ready to go just because it came out of AI. And I'm not even talking about, hallucinations and strange content creation, but even the formatting, even the ideas, even the way it presents things, even the way it organizes your own thoughts, add that human value, I think, is a good one with final check. The second one in the adding human value is that idea of EQ, that emotional intelligence. As I remember having a conversation with our guest who was talking about real estate, AI couldn't comprehend the idea of why people would not, move out of an apartment they're no longer paying for. Why would they squat? It doesn't make any sense, which, for most reasonable people, it would not make any sense, but it does happen. So we should be asking questions is, what is that human touch, both in the positive and the negative? And is there a human problem we can continue to solve? So if people are looking for business ideas, instead of just taking an existing thing and trying to automate it or create AIs, what is the human thing we can connect with the technology? I think is a great question, right? Where AI may not be able to comprehend the oddities of our thinking or the emotional responses we may have, right? Or even as, I don't know if that was Andrew's episode or somebody else's, when we're talking about identifying a tear as a negative emotion. Can AI truly understand that that's a tear? Can it contextualize that emotion? because if you zoom out and it's at a wedding, right, then maybe that's a happy tear. Or maybe there's a mix of sadness and happiness depending on the circumstance and the whole story. Those are the areas I feel like use AI, automate your life, simplify your life, use great tools. There's tons of existence, and they're going to keep refining themselves. I think we're seeing so many, I would even say beta level tools, not even fully ready for market, that are getting a lot of popularity. But as they get better and better, I think we'll find even more ways to make our life simpler. But let's not forget that we should be responsible for the quality of the work we create. That could be code, that could be content, that could be media. But also, let's ask the question of where's the humanity in this and kind of add that on top. Any thoughts, Christophe? Kind of anything you want to add to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's been going on in this last couple of years. I feel as though people have become more sensitized to it now. So I think it's the thought that it's Skynet's here, that it's going to take over all our jobs, whether it's in tech or any other space. It's kind of died down a bit. No, I'm not saying completely, because it does do a really good job in a lot of things. But I think people are also recognizing that it's not quite at that point where it can take over everything, and that there really is, it's a great value add tool. It really can expedite a ton of work. But like the way you put it, it's not going to finish the work. And in a way, really, it needs a lot of context to be able to even create decent work to start with. So what we're just recognizing more and more is there really just needs to be the human element to it at the beginning and throughout to really get a good output. It just allows us to just go a lot faster, a lot further in certain things. Again, there is also that recognition that there's certain jobs that it's really good at and certain jobs that it's not quite as good at. But I think there's just some wisdom in knowing when to use it, how to use it, and not just defaulting to it. It's kind of like, you start seeing everything as one type of problem and failing to recognize that, you might need a screwdriver versus a nail, or a hammer to clobber in one nail. So it's just the wisdom, I think. And I think that's what's happening over the last year and a half, as people are getting more and more used to the different tools, is understanding what to use when and how to use it better. And I think that'll just keep getting more refined over the.
So I was having a chat with an artist friend of mine who used to be in Vietnam and is in the Middle East right now. And we're talking about it, and he was like, do you remember that obsession with the NFTs that happened? And, the craziness where everybody thought everybody's going to be a billionaire by just creating that token and whatever it may be. And I think we're going through that obsession where we're grabbing onto little bits and pieces, and good for people who are creating these companies that, sell you prompts because, this week's prompts or whatever it may be. And I remember back in the 90s, and I think it was covered in at least one conversation with a guest, is learning how to better use search engines was an art form, right? It took experience because search engines were not perfected, that you had to ask in a very specific way, whether it was using Booleans or whether it was using, certain formatting. And I think we're in that point right now when we're communicating with large language models of AI and things like that, that there is a training that needs to happen both for humans to learn how to use it better. And I think there's a space for that. But I do think as it continues to evolve, and especially as we go beyond the LLMs, I think right now, if you talk to most people on the street, the only example of AI they can think of is really large language models, right? It's ChatGPT type stuff, maybe some image creation stuff. But in general, that's really what they think about. But there's so much more, whether it's analysis. The idea of the thing that inspires me, I have both inspiration and kind of, mild fears on some of those things. But the inspiration would be AI can do so much deeper analysis of images, let's say cancer screenings, right? Doctors are more likely to miss them because our eyes just are not able to be scanning everything. And again, I'm not saying we should eliminate the doctor scanning it, but hey, let AI scan the patterns and say, hey, we can catch certain cancers 6 months earlier or a year earlier. So I think that that'd be fun because the processing power is just bigger than what we can do in individual levels. So I think that's what kind of excites me. I will switch to the two things that concern me overall, and some of it is, pace of change. I think we're going to evolve some of our thinking along the way. But the first one I would say is, I think there is a desire to be over reliant on it where we are giving up our critical thinking. And I mentioned this before we started the call. I'm a little concerned when I read that almost a third of people have switched their default search engine, I put that in quotes, to ChatGPT in their browsers. Not saying they should be using Google or DuckDuckGo or Bravo or whatever else, but the idea of a search engine result list, and of course we know that Google's trying to compete with it by putting the AI response at the top, but the idea of you still getting multiple responses and multiple sources, and now with ChatGPT you're getting an answer that you're just assuming is right, thus removing the capacity to analyze multiple things of data and make a decision. Wait a minute. There's not one answer. There's not one clear, I watched a fun video recently from a geography channel that I really like. And he was talking about the idea of this country, North Macedonia, and what is Macedonian? Is he Greek? Is he Slavic? Is he not? And he said, well, if you ask this person, you get this answer. If you ask this person, you get this answer. However, you get to ChatGPT, you get one answer now. So all this subtlety, all these different things that you get, it's gone. And I think that worries me for the people who are not understanding, particularly the younger generation, the ones in school right now, who haven't had to think through, wait, which answer really makes sense for the context that I'm trying to do. The second thing, and I go back to our session with Kate, who's a data scientist, we're talking about content. Particularly, I'm seeing more and more of this, and that worries me because so much more content is being AI generated. And then on the other hand, the folks who are creating content that's not AI generated are putting more and more of it behind paywalls. So then we're kind of feeding the machine with its own content, where when analyzing multiple sources, it's actually analyzing stuff that the AI created. We're not getting the variety of opinions and scholars and whatever it may be, or different cultural things. Even, something as silly as recipes. I was looking at recipes and it was just missing the mark when I was looking for a very particular recipe. It happened to be a French recipe that I was looking at. And I was like, wait a minute, you're giving me stuff that's not even close to what I'm looking for. And then I said, I should go look at some blogs. And that kind of helped me. But I've noticed that concerns me because the pace of creation, I remember reading in 2007, we were at a pace where the number of images taken per year was equivalent to several decades worth of photography done before that. And now, since 2007, we've taken more photographs than have ever been taken in history before that. So, we've gotten to that point. Doesn't mean that everything we've taken is quality. I mean, there's only so many pictures of avocado toast that are needed, but they do exist. But I think we're going to get to that point where content is being created at such rapid pace. There is no curation, and then some of the best content is being put behind paywalls or is being transmitted in other ways. And I'm concerned about the quality of material and quality of information diminishing. So that's kind of my excitement and my concern of the AI world, particularly moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like in anything when you have such an earth-shattering type of technology that comes into existence in a way, or at least comes into becoming part of the popular space. It's a double-edged sword, whether that was like, yeah, automation, it's great, but then suddenly you had a ton of loss of jobs and also quality, like there's just all sorts of different things that are happening and these tensions that start to push and pull. And there's that learning that happens as there's the great benefits, but also the over reliance. And sometimes, we fail to ask what's happening inside the magic box and assuming that what pops out is, the perfect answer. I think natural behavior is we're pretty lazy people, everybody. And I think that's biologically, we were programmed that way to try to become as efficient as possible. I think that's generally for a good thing. It's part of the motivation and the drive towards efficiency and being better. But because of that, then sometimes we fail to ask the deeper, harder questions that might or should be asked at times when we feel as though the answer sounds so close to being the truth. It must be the truth. I think there's two sides to it. Like just a few weeks back, I was over in San Francisco for TechCrunch, and there was some new technology. It was a combination of hardware using AI, where they were able to produce a piece of hardware that would allow essentially doing breast scans for being able to test for breast cancer. And it was a cheap device that could go out in the middle of nowhere. And it was made to be able to be used in spaces that you'd never be able to have the devices that were necessary to do a solid breast cancer test. And so by doing this, they could go into small villages. And because they used these devices, they were able to diagnose anomalies. Now, I wouldn't say it was certainty, but what it would do is it would allow them to say, hey, you should go to a doctor and get a full scan. And so that way you'll be able to have a more likely positive test if it's needed. So that way you're doing it at a much cheaper cost. So that's like the beautiful part of it. Now you're using the technology for human flourishing. You really are going to save tremendous amount of lives that would not have had access to a technology that could save their lives because in history, they just would have been too late to have gotten the scan early enough for it to be effective and useful. So, I mean, that's beautiful. It's using technology in such a way that it can really advance human health, especially for those who are at the greatest risk. That's a beautiful use of a technology like that. But then there is the risky side on the other end where it's like, simplifying our lives, and then where we fail to really advance our own mental capacities because we're just using the easiest, quickest thing. We're just cut and pasting code as developers, or we're using it for copywriting, and we're, not really thoughtful about it. And so definitely there's a part where hopefully people can be trying to take the best out of it and be wise about the failings that can come with it.
Yeah, I think what you said is perfect in the sense of if we're using it to make things better, right? I purposely wore this t-shirt. It's one of my favorite shirts. This idea of continual growth and personal development. Obviously, technology is moving at a pace. We talk about the idea of the evolution of speed of pace development technology is amazing, right? The things that we couldn't even imagine when I finished university last century are changing monthly. Like you getting updates and you're getting so many things that were not even thought of 10 years ago within a month of development. The space of iteration, the idea of people building on top of each other's ideas. I'm hoping that we continue with the trend of open source more and not just have to worry. But I think, yes, going back to let's make sure we don't give up the idea of transparency and not just have a bunch of black boxes where we can't ask the questions, right? I think that's a trend in general, and particularly large language models that concerns me a little bit. But the big challenge for a human being, and that's what I've kind of challenged myself, and I'm encouraging a few other folks I'm talking to do the same, is let's use these tools to simplify our lives, to remove the things that are routine or mundane, that are not helping us grow, right? That are not, that are taking up our time, that the system can do better. But then let's use that time with, okay, what else can I be doing as a human? Is there more learning I can do? Is there more human to human conversation I need to be having, maintaining better relationships? Is there more I can do for my health? Whatever it may be, right, that allows us, it frees up our time. And I'm hoping it doesn't mean that we're just staring more into the doom scroll of it all, right? I had to write up a contract recently and I used Gemini, great, to do a draft of a contract. I polished it up and did it, saved me a good half an hour of work. So hopefully I didn't choose to sit there and, as you said, scroll an extra half an hour, but instead, watch the tutorial on something I've been wanting to learn for a while, whatever it may be, or go for a walk. So I think we as people need to be responsible with our choices and kind of be thinking and also thinking about the gaps the technology creating. You mentioned the far out reaches of the world. I think there's still a decent portion of the world. I'm guessing 3 hours from Da Nang, there's folks who don't know what ChatGPT is and have not had access to that level of technology. So we're creating wider gaps on some levels, but it's going to impact their lives too. So can we help some other folks along the way? Okay, well, this is a good pivot point for us. We are wrapping up 2024. We had a good time with our guests. We had a lot of fun. We had, a lot of interesting growth for Code Engine Studio, some great clients to work with, fun projects. Let's look forward to 2025 and let's kind of bat around things that you see coming in 2025. And I'm going to start on a fun note because if you Google, expectations for 2025, one of the first things comes up is disappearing jobs. And of course, because we're a tech company, people are saying, well, we don't need programmers anymore, right? AI is going to do all the programming. And by the end of 2025, you won't need a single programmer. In fact, you have parents who are now telling their kids, don't go get a computer science degree. So, Christophe, do you think Code Engine Studio will be out of business by 2025 because nobody will need programmers?
It's kind of like, I think they sent a space shuttle to the moon on something like, I don't know, it was like 8K of RAM or something. Don't quote. The idea is it took almost nothing, like in actual memory. But here we are nowadays, and I have to have 32 gigs of RAM on my machine just so I can run a few things, and Chrome hopefully doesn't crash. And so it's kind of the natural effects of advancement where you need more and more so that way we can build on each other. So that way we can advance and grow things better and stronger. So like we kind of have already alluded to is AI is a wonderful tool. It's kind of a terrible master in that sense of it's not going to do everything. It just really isn't in that space yet. Who knows? Maybe one day it could, but we're certainly not going to be there in the next year, probably a good ways out because it was kind of like magical when it first started and it seemed almost surreal. And so I think people were thinking that was going to be the case. People were a little bit more hesitant of their budgets, what they were spending it on, how should they be using it in AI. And I think once they've come to realize, yeah, okay, it could be a great tool, but it's not a panacea. It's not going to suddenly cure all the woes of your business and suddenly people are going to start throwing money at you because you've put a bot on your page or something. I think what people are realizing, it is what it is. It's a great tool. It's kind of like the robots, and automation didn't suddenly fix everything. What it allowed us to do is it allowed us to make things at a whole another scale, level of efficiency, allowed us to have more creativity in a lot of ways. And it changed our roles in factories and such. And so it's kind of the same thing. I don't think that AI is in any case going to be taking all the technology roles anytime soon, but it's going to help us to be more efficient. We're going to be able to get much more done much more quickly. The way I like to think about it is I remember when we first started doing web application development, around like 2000s or so, even before that, the amount of time and effort it took us to make the most basic of websites, and the cost was extremely prohibitive. If anybody remembers GeoCities, like way back in the day, yeah, they look totally janky. But then if you really want something reasonably professional, then you had to hire somebody. It was very cost prohibitive. And even then, the quality was moderate at best. Now here we are. You can go pick up a site for like a few bucks a month on, Wix, Squarespace, all these different things. Or if you want to do a little bit of customization on WordPress yourself, and it's amazing, what you can do. And so it just allows us to advance so much further. And it's just these tools are advancing us to be able to do even more creative, bigger things, which we as humans, that's part of what we want. We want to be able to do even more. We want to express ourselves in other creative ways. And these tools help us to take advantage of that and of our time.
Yeah, and I think even the type of work we do with clients and the type of clients that we have now has pivoted away from where we were 7, 8, 9 years ago when we first were starting out. And we're not doing as many front-end marketing websites because there's so many other tools out there, between AI tools and not just AI tools, that can generate a lot of that probably is not needed to have a full development team to create a marketing website. And also the quote unquote traditional ways from 5, 7 years ago of doing a marketing website have evolved beyond needed because the pace of iteration has moved on, right? And I think that that's the parts we need to look at, is like the way e-commerce is done differently. Would you be able to do an e-commerce and deliver content on the fly and have a lot of things that, it was not the same way. I remember ShopSite in 1999 is the first e-commerce tool I ever worked on. And the amount of work you had to do to create a single catalog item was ridiculous. And now we were talking with one of our guests about digital asset management system. Those dams are damn useful. They're great because you can use AI to automate it and scan the image and index all this, and you can have much better search results when you look in a particular product. And I was talking to a chef here recently, and he started telling me that there are 7 kinds of molasses in the world. I didn't know that. So I went and started searching, like, oh, you can actually search for that now. So it's great because the more we can offload from that, the more we can focus on taking care of customers' needs when it comes to actually helping them understand their needs for what their product will actually do. So not just here's what it needs to look like, but what does it need to do? How do we break it from business needs to the technology piece of it, using AI tools, using automation tools, using better layers of security through technology or whatever it may be, to deliver results with the human helping them break it into pieces and helping them deliver the pieces that may not be accessible to AI, like backend stuff or connecting database or writing some of the code that will help connect the data points and allow the customers to interact better. So I think that's a great input that, we may be pivoting what we're doing for the clients, but I don't see programming going out of business anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think on top of it, I think we are going to see in certain cases some pushback. Different countries are more or less open to utilization of AI. In North America, it's not a lot of regulation. It's pretty open, and they feel as though it's an arms race that they need to be able to keep fully open and unregulated, very limitedly. Where Europe feels a little differently, and there's certain sectors as well, like banking, private places where the privacy is key, paramount. There's going to be pushback as well. And I think there are going to be some spaces where that's going to become more clear, where they might have thought, oh, we can take advantage of it, but they've come to realize that, well, where's that data going and how is that going to be accessed and such. So I think there's still like, yeah, okay, we can advance coding, and because it's kind of not, but you don't know where all the data is. But once we start integrating into different spaces, there's going to be some pushback as well. So I think there is certain things where people are going to be required to have humans just because we're trustworthy at this moment, so to speak. So yeah, there's a lot to work through.
Yeah, I would even say it's not as much about trustworthiness, but about clear accountability. Because I think with humans, you can demand that accountability. There's logs, there's patterns. You can see this is the person who did this behavior. If you're using AI, there may not be a level of accountability simply because you don't know what's in that black box. And I think for those who want to hear about this, just the repercussions of being aware of some legal issues when it comes to AI. Listen to the episode with Greg, a wonderful attorney out of Alberta, who addresses some of the concerns. Like even if you're running your customer data for analysis through ChatGPT, you may be exposing your customer data to things that you weren't planning on. So you need to be aware and make sure your customers are aware of that and cover yourself on that. Okay, so we're not going out of business for lack of need for developers. Do you see different areas of focus? Let me give you kind of an example. I think going back to what was an obsession, I think about 3-4 years ago, is the idea of everybody got obsessed with Bitcoin. And of course, everybody became a Bitcoin billionaire, within days. Then the broader idea of crypto. But I think there's underlying technologies out there. The same thing I think with AI. People are very hung up on large language models, but there's more to it. Like Andrew did a great job on his episode talking about there's other types of AI out there. But we're missing out. There's so many more uses out there now with blockchain technology, which is not just crypto, right? There's much more to AI than just creating cute pictures on image gen and having content creation through ChatGPT or whatever. Do you see any niche areas that you think might bubble up and gain more popularity in 2025?
Well, I mean, I think that's where already it's leading with AI. I think there's once you get to LLMs, it's an arms race, and it really takes tremendous amount of money. And so you're already seeing it, like they're aggregating, they're getting larger, and there's only so many people who are going to be able to stay in that arms race. So I think where AI is going to be heading, and you're starting to already see it a lot more, is this idea of agentic type of AI, where it's much smaller, where it's just trying to deal with a smaller problem. And to be honest, in most business scenarios, you don't need to be able to answer every problem. You just have a very clear, concise problem statement that you're dealing with. And you just need to be able to train it to be excellent at dealing with that problem. So that's kind of where I think things are moving a lot more towards saying, okay, instead of saying this is the all powerful brain, it's going to be, hey, this is the tool that helps us to optimize our costs. This is the one that optimizes towards image production or whatever these things are. So I think what they're recognizing is once you try to get it to do everything, you're going to have a lot more risks of hallucinations and problems. And so that's really what's already materializing right now, trying to keep the problems in a much more clear, concise box so that way it's able to give you a much better solution. And I think that's what's going to happen overall. And I feel like a lot of businesses are already like that, even in technology. It's coming up with an amazing solution towards a very small and clear problem. And then after you can reuse it. It's just like in the sense that you talked about open source. What's the problem that fits inside this box? And then we can reuse that over and over again. And so I feel like that's a little bit of what's going to happen as well in this next year. The magic is a little bit now, okay, we understand it. Now, how do we actually make money out of it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting to more and more private systems, private analysis, where it's very, very specific, hyper-specific training, right? We visited one of our clients as a furniture factory in North Carolina, among other places, but he took me over to one of his neighbors who has a robot, and the robot does one very specific thing. It takes an item, moves it, turns it, moves it again. And it was just doing that little thing over and over again. But the cool thing about it is very specifically trained. It accounts for anomalies. It can do it 24/7. In fact, they had to stop the robot a couple times because they couldn't keep up feeding the machine fast enough with the materials that it was processing. But they've gotten better at it and they can do it. So I think, but that robot saves them, dozens of hours of human work that, you don't have to worry about, right? And it gets done very particular job, very specifically. I think that's what we're getting with a lot of the AI stuff. And I think even the same thing what I was mentioning with blockchain, when people talked about blockchain 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and even 2 years ago, it was also about crypto. But I was listening to a presentation of somebody about agro business and talking about quality of food and tracking their materials through blockchain and being able to be accountable that when we say you're buying a product of food, that is exactly what's in it because that ledger is distributed and is using that blockchain technology to show that transparently and accountably, which I think is such a powerful idea. If we allow technology to make the world better again, then there's and it's a very niche need, right? Not every person is going to be a farmer who needs to verify that his chicken feed has exact materials that he thought he's going to need. But guess what? We all like eggs. Well, many of us like eggs. We would like them to be good quality eggs. So it impacts us even if it doesn't impact us directly. Okay. So let's pretend to be fortune tellers and we're sitting here a year from now. What do you think is going to be the big wow that surprises people that is already happening that they're not thinking about? And I'm not just talking about the in the industry, but people in the mainstream world. Is there something they're going to learn about or is going to become hot? I mean, this is a hard question, obviously. I'm asking you to put on your wizard hat here. But is there anything that you can think of that people just have not heard of yet technologically that I think is going to make a difference in their lives out there? Or it could be the other side is, are there concerns about technology that you think are going to bubble up more?
I mean, I think the concerns are much easier. We've already kind of addressed it. Like, it's hard to almost be more wow than AI has been in the last year, right? It's kind of what I'm thinking is like, what is going to be more impactful? Because even the way you talked about it before that was talking about Bitcoin and distributed ledgers and then, NFTs, but it really was very niche. It really didn't have as much application. And I do think, like you said, that there are a lot of business things. It's just finding the right use case for it. And in most cases, it's a little bit overhyped and it doesn't deliver. Yeah, it's a bit overhyped, but it will deliver in so many ways. So it's almost hard to say what in 1 year is going to be nearly as impactful. I really have a hard time imagining there's still anything that's going to be any more impactful on such a widespread scale as AI because there's so much adoption and there's so much still to adjust. I think the difference is the sense of like in the VC world and all these different places where who have all the money. I think there's going to be that sense, like back in the day when people were just throwing money at anything, it's because they wanted to be the next unicorn. And they're like, oh, even if you don't make any money, you don't have to have any business sense. You just get enough eyes, and we know that eventually it'll just suddenly materialize to be a gigantic business. And that's become a lot less attractive. I don't think they're realizing it has to have some real business sense behind it. And I think that's what's going to happen in this next year. So it's not so much what's going to surprise. It's going to be the fact that I think we're going to get back to a bit more of the fundamentals of saying, okay, yeah, AI is going to make a massive change, but how are you really going to make money? And all these apps, there's a million and one that are just wrappers. It's a little bit of a functional tool, but it's really just sitting on top of somebody else's tech. And as soon as that tech decides to charge what it's really worth because they're done funding everybody's pet project, those projects are probably going to have to come crashing down. What's going to land is what's really useful tools that have business fundamentals that are actually really making money because they're good for the average person or they're good in the business case, whatever it is. So I think that's what's really going to happen. I think there's a part where people are going to have to just get back to how is this really dealing with something that is meaningful to somebody so it's actually a viable business.
Yeah, and I think we can take it even a step further what you're saying. It's not just the business making money. Are we solving problems, right? And I think whether it's because ultimately if you solve problems, people will give you money as a solution, right? And yes, I remember the hype of the .com 98, 99. I was in Silicon Valley for that. And I remember anybody who had a .com idea that sounded even borderline feasible was getting money thrown at them. And by 2000, 2001, that was dead. You had a bubble crash. You had people who lost money and realized you actually need to have a solution to a problem. And I think we're going to get that way, whether it's you're talking about rappers, but I also think it's getting more niche. I really enjoy just the thought process behind Greg, our attorney guest, because he has a product and they previously did something that you could do with AI now, right? They started out by having a tool that will build a very custom legal document for you. Now they were doing a much more specific job than just by asking ChatGPT, give me a contract. But what they're doing now is they're saying, okay, can we use AI to provide you tools that will save you time within your legal infrastructure? So if you are a landlord and you have 50 apartments, making sure that, hey, when is this one expiring? What is going on, or who did not sign their document, and just having that kind of do the analysis for you instead of you having to go and cross check all this or manually keep up with some spreadsheet or whatever else, where it can analyze your documents, or something as simple as just talking to somebody else who does a lot of things. They have to constantly send out reminders. Like, wouldn't it be great if I had a system that would look and say who paid, who didn't pay? Let me send out reminders to those people. And they're dealing with parents. And, being a parent yourself, you guys get busy. Sometimes you forget because your child forgot to tell you they're supposed to turn in a form and somebody has to go through the list of all the parents. But if you can set up an automated tool that goes through a list, a roster of parents, and here's what should happen, and cross references with, let's say bank transfers or, Zelle, Venmo, whatever payments, and puts them all in one place and automates it. Yeah, that's going to make life a lot easier. So I think what you said is kind of what I was thinking is we're going to become a society where many tools are created using technology. And again, they're going to become paid tools more and more where going to, again, as you said, see the value in the underlying tech. But I think people are going to say, you know what, this is going to save me 5 hours a week. Whatever my hourly rate is, if I can save 5 hours a week, is it worth paying $10 a month, $20 a month for a tool that saves me that every week? Absolutely. And we're going to start seeing more and more of that. If we're willing to pay for Spotify subscriptions and we're willing to pay for, what is it? I just read an average American pays for 7 streaming services a month, which I think is kind of silly. But if we're willing to do that just to entertain ourselves, if we can have tools that can solve problems, and then I think eventually we'll get back to conglomeration where you can buy a suite of tools and then become like an office suite or something like that will automate processes for accounting or bookkeeping or organizational management. I think we're going to move into that. But I do think 2025, we're going to start seeing more niche-oriented solutions being provided and optimized that are really solving problems and are making money for people while doing that. So we kind of are looking at wrapping this up, and just kind of what final thoughts do you have for what you're looking forward to in the tech space or for Code Engine Studio in general for 2025?
I'm kind of just excited for a bit of a die down of that. I think getting back to people who are like, okay, let's get back to spending on projects that are actually just important to the business versus a little bit of the flash in the pan. I'm not saying again those projects with AI weren't potentially valuable, but I think they kind of took up a little bit too much mind share. And I think now they're like, okay, let's reevaluate our budgets for 2025. And I'm excited of getting back to some really interesting projects that some of our clients have in mind. Even some of the people we were talking to out there who are looking at building new things, new startups. There's some stuff, obviously the AI is going to be a part of it, but I think there's just some really interesting things again, as people are now realizing, yeah, our clients have other needs. It's not just going to be just a one trick pony kind of thing. I feel like 2025 was really just so highly focused on it that now we're getting back to a point where I feel like our clients that we're talking to are just thinking about a bigger picture again, a more holistic picture versus kind of just one side of the coin. And so I'm looking forward to being able to work on some really exciting projects as clients are, again, feeling a little bit more certainty. Even in the US, a lot of our clients are US based. And so just with the clear decision in the election and everything that's going on. So I just feel like there's a lot of uncertainty in 2024, where 2025, it's like, okay, you may or may not like what happened, but now we know it's going to go forward. And so I just feel like this year's got a lot more certainty. And once there's a little bit more certainty, things can start to just, I think, grow and advance in a whole other direction.
Yeah, and I think what we experienced, and this is very cyclical, right? I think we see this every few years and new tech comes up and we're focused on tech for the sake of tech. And I think we get past that point and we get to a point where, okay, how can I use it in regular, just make it a routine part of life? Like we don't think about the fact that GPS is just something we're so used to, right? You drove in the United States or, people are driving cars. You don't even think about the fact that directions are right there. It's just routine. We're just now looking for, okay, how do I use it to bypass traffic? Because I got stuck for 2 hours in traffic here last week, and that was not fun. But thankfully, he kept saying, hey, I found a shorter route. I found a shorter route. So that was great. But I do think we're getting to a point where it's not going to be for technology's sake. It's going to be back to the basics of what value can my business provide to the customer. Therefore, what value can I add? What the tools can I build to make my business better, both internally and externally? And that's always exciting. My own goal for 2025 is really to keep investing into people, because at the end of the day, if we as people encourage ourselves to get 1% better every day, to continue that growth, to learn the new tools, but also not forget the fundamental things, the critical thinking, the emotional intelligence, the stuff that makes us uniquely human, that we're not just machines to be replaced out there, that we're not just, useless, that we bring a ton of value as human beings, as created in a very particular way, with every single one of us having a very unique imprint from the creator. I think that's a very powerful thought, and I'm enjoying that and enjoying investing locally and really spending time helping people be better. So that's kind of my focus, and I think technology is a part of that, as long as it's a tool and we understand that that's what it is. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to kind of add a little on to that. Like, that's one of the things I'm excited about in this idea of like, as new opportunities are coming about, I feel like it's back to a little bit more of the fundamentals. But I think at the same time, what I love about when we have these new technology, especially something that as impactful as AI is, what it does is it frees us to think greater than we did before. It's like maybe something felt impossible before. Now it's like, well, actually, is it impossible? And so, like, it's kind of going back to that, like, that idea of that machine that was able to detect potential breast cancer. It's like, wow, we could do that at like a few $100s to create a machine that can really impact humans and really promote human flourishing. That's like, it was unfathomable. And so like getting back to the basics, like, hey, let's get back to like really impacting people's lives. Let's do good business. Let's deliver great products, deliver great services, whatever those things are. But like now we can think bigger. We can do things that we couldn't do before. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about us doing stuff, not just for the sake of technology like you were talking about there, but really, hey, let's use technology in a way that moves the needle in people's lives and really moves for our clients, but it's actually meaningful and not just kind of for its own sake.
Yeah, these barriers are often in our own minds and just seeing them broken down. You mentioned the cancer screening device. I mean, even if you think about it, I remember the very first time I saw a mobile device, right? A very basic cell phone that was a satellite phone that you can drive it and use anywhere, and it was a ridiculous amount of cost. Now, the amount of technology where you were talking about Apollo, which by the way was 12 kilobytes was the entire RAM of the entire Apollo system. I think I couldn't turn on this webcam with 12 kilobytes or anything like that. So, but the fact that I can carry in my hand now more technology than we ever saw until 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or whatever, and just the sheer volume of what's accessible to us and how much information is accessible to us, we have a responsibility to do better with it and do things where it's no longer inaccessible to people remotely or we can't afford it, right? I know some people want to buy $1,000 iPhone, but you can get away, and people who didn't have access to any technology, you can get $100 quality smartphone, that will do the job that you couldn't imagine doing 10 years ago. That just didn't exist technologically. It couldn't be done. And I think sooner or later, other things are going to become more democratized in that way where we have access to them, as long as we understand that they are just tools, and that obsession of technology for technology's sake does not rule our lives. I think we need to remember to be better humans, seek for the image that we are built for, and then use technology as tools to do so. So that's kind of my final words for 2024 here for our guests. Thank you, Christophe, for being a part of this ultimate episode for the year. It has been a lot of fun talking with close to 30 different guests on the show. And I hope everybody has a lovely 2025 ahead. Bye.
All right. Thank you.